Imagine this, an Airbus A330, it's full of passengers, and it's absolutely thundering down the runway, gaining speed for takeoff.
Okay.
But here's the really terrifying catch. Every single one of its airspeed indicators is completely out. Just blank.
Wow.
The pilots are left to fly and eventually land this massive aircraft without, one of the most fundamental pieces of information they need.
Right. Airspeed is pretty basic.
Exactly. And this isn't just a story about pilot heroics, although, well, there's definitely plenty of that. It's this incredible, almost unbelievable tale of how a tiny, really unexpected culprit and a chain of seemingly small oversights almost led to, well, disaster.
Yeah, it's a classic case, really. A textbook example of how even really robust safety systems can be compromised when a series of these seemingly minor failures just line up perfectly.
And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the details of Malaysian Airlines Flight 134. We'll explore how an everyday insect caused a really serious aviation incident.
An insect, yeah.
We'll look deeply into the human factors involved, the layers of safety, the Swiss cheese layers that were pierced, and what this whole experience reveals about how critical information can just get missed.
It's fascinating stuff.
We'll show you how Dr. Reason's Swiss cheese model works in real life and why understanding it is so important for you. I mean, whether you're flying a plane or just managing your daily to-do list.
Absolutely. The principles apply everywhere.
So let's dive into our story's unlikely villain. The Mud Wasp.
The Mud Wasp, right.
Yeah, Mud Wasp isn't just one type. It's actually a group name for several kinds of wasps. But they all share this common and, frankly, rather annoying habit. They love building their nests in small cavities.
Especially man-made ones.
Exactly. They're prevalent all over Australia, but particularly common along the eastern seaboard near Brisbane, which is where our story really takes flight.
And their favorite target on an aircraft, it's the pitot tube.
Ah, the pitot tubes.
Yeah, these aren't just random holes on the plane. They're precision instruments. They measure the aircraft's airspeed.
How do they actually do that?
Well, basically, they take the dynamic pressure that's essentially the wind rushing into the tube as the plane moves, and they subtract the static pressure, which is just the ambient air pressure around the aircraft.
Okay.
And the difference between those two, that gives pilots the crucial airspeed reading they need to fly safely. And for redundancy, I mean, this is critical. Commercial aircraft have at least 3 independent pitot probes.
3 of them.
Okay.
And what's truly unsettling, kind of scary actually, is the speed at which these tiny architects can cause huge problems.
Yeah, get this. Studies showed a mud wasp could start infesting a pitot probe in as little as 20 minutes after an aircraft stops at the gate.
20 minutes? That's incredibly fast.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Brisbane airport authorities, they were very aware of this. There was a known infestation problem between 2015 and 2018.
So they knew this was a risk. What did they do about it?
Well, their response was pretty proactive, actually. They sent out warning letters to operators, especially those with long turnarounds or overnight stays,
Right.
advising them strongly to use pitot probe covers.
Ah, those covers you sometimes see.
Exactly. They look like little mittens, often bright red or orange with long streamers, designed to be really conspicuous, hard to miss.
Okay.
Now, Malaysia Airlines, they just resumed flights to Brisbane. They had been notified about the infestation, and the airline itself had agreed, yes, we'll use the covers.
Good. So problem solved.
Well, no. And here's the first critical vulnerability. The first hole in the cheese, if you will. This vital information, this agreement to use covers, it wasn't effectively communicated down the chain. Not to the pilots, and crucially, not to the line maintenance engineers on the ground.
Oh, so the airport knew, the airline sort of headquarters knew, but the people actually handling the plane didn't have that specific instruction or awareness.
Precisely. Which brings us to the first significant misstep in this chain of events. It's July 18th, 2018. The Airbus A330 arrives in Brisbane, 8:20 p.m. 25 minutes later, 8:45 p.m., an assistant engineer arrives out on the apron. He's got the 3 pitot probe covers with him. He gets some mobile steps, goes up to the nose of the aircraft, and fits them onto all 3 probes. Just like he's supposed to.
Right. Following procedure based on someone's understanding.
Exactly. After fitting the covers, he goes up to the cockpit. He tells the line assist engineer, now this engineer was dispatched from Kuala Lumpur, specifically for these turnaround checks. He tells them, hey, I fitted the probe covers.
Okay, direct communication.
Direct communication, yes. But he received no response, nothing. And the line assist engineer, he didn't note it down in the technical logbook.
No response and no log entry. That sounds Odd.
It's more than odd. It's a critical communication gap. It suggests the line assist engineer either didn't hear him properly, didn't understand the significance, or maybe just wasn't expecting that piece of information, so it didn't register. It wasn't formally captured.
Wow. You'd think for something like covering essential instruments, there'd be a clearer protocol. A verbal confirm, maybe?
You would hope so. But if that first message didn't land, well, what happened next? How did another layer of defense start to weaken?
Yeah, what was the next hole?
Okay, so the line assist engineer's walk around. This happens around 8:54 p.m., and it's captured on CCTV.
Okay.
He walks around the nose, shines his flashlight, and he sees the covers. He noticed them. He even admitted later in interviews that he was confused.
Confused, why?
Because he hadn't asked for them to be put on. And crucially, he was completely unaware of this whole Mud Wasp problem at Brisbane Airport.
Ah, that communication gap again.
Right, so he sees them, he's puzzled, and he makes a mental note.
Oh no, not a mental note.
Yep, a mental note to tell the assistant engineer, hey, take those covers off.
That just feels like such a classic human thing to do. But in aviation, relying on a mental note, especially when things get busy, how reliable is that really?
It's incredibly unreliable. And this incident is just a perfect illustration of why. Because what happens next? Well, common human behavior kicks in.
Predictable, almost.
The assistant engineer comes back, they start getting busy with other tasks, replenishing oils, and then the fueling starts. The line assist engineer, he's in charge of the fueling process, which is, a complex task in itself, lots of checks and procedures.
Right, needs focus.
Needs focus.
Yeah.
And amidst all that, he completely forgot about the PIPO covers. Gone.
Poof.
Exactly. And it's not just simple forgetting. It's about cognitive load, right? Our working memory is limited, especially when we're under pressure or juggling multiple tasks. Mental notes are just a high-risk strategy in these critical environments.
Yeah, that makes sense. High reliability organizations, they try to build in external reminders, right? Not just rely on someone remembering.
Precisely. They institutionalize checks and balances.
Okay, so 2 opportunities missed already. Communication gap, then a forgotten mental note. Now, for something I find truly remarkable, the captain's role and this concept of inattentional blindness.
Yeah, this part is fascinating.
Tell us about the crew.
Okay, the flight crew, they were both very experienced pilots. The captain had over 14,400 total flying hours. Now, only about 555 were on this specific aircraft type, the A330, as he recently converted.
Okay, still a lot of experience overall.
Absolutely. The first officer, he had about 6,500 total hours, but the majority of that was on the A330. So, interestingly, the first officer was actually more experienced on type than the captain.
Okay. And the first officer was flying this leg.
Correct. He was designated pilot flying. That means the captain was the pilot monitoring, and part of the pilot monitoring role is doing the pre-flight walk-around inspection.
Right. So the captain does the walk-around. When did this happen?
About 10:54 p.m. Again, it's on the CCTV footage.
Yeah.
And the walk-around was, well, it was very quick.
Quick how?
He looked at the left side of the nose, then seemed to quickly move around, kind of skipping the right side of the nose section where the probes are located, and then continued back along the aircraft.
Wait, he skipped the side with the probes?
He didn't seem to pause or focus there. And despite looking in the general direction of the pitot probes as he moved past, he clearly missed the installed covers with their bright, long streamers.
He looked, but he didn't see them. That's incredible. How does that happen?
It's a textbook example of what psychologists call inattentional blindness.
Inattentional blindness.
Yeah. You're technically looking right at something, your eyes register it, but you don't perceive it. Your brain doesn't process it because your mind is focused elsewhere. Or, crucially here, you're just not expecting to see it.
So, because covers weren't normally used on their routine turnarounds?
Exactly. For these pilots, seeing pitot probe covers on a standard turnaround check in Brisbane was completely unexpected. It wasn't part of their mental schema, their routine pattern for that task. So even though the visual information, the covers and streamers, was right there,
His brain just filtered it out. Wow.
it filtered it out because it wasn't deemed relevant to the expected task. It's a really powerful reminder that our perception is so heavily influenced by our expectations and where our attention is directed. You really have to consciously look for things, especially safety items.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many times we've all done that in daily life. You're looking for your keys, and they're right there, but you don't see them because you're expecting them to be somewhere else.
Exactly that principle.
Okay. But the failures, they didn't stop there, did they? The next critical vulnerability, the next hole in the cheese, came inside the cockpit during the checklists.
That's right. During the before-start checklist, the checklist item, gear pins and covers, came up.
Okay. Standard item.
Standard item. And the first officer, apparently without hesitation, responded, removed.
Yes, something like that. Removed. But they weren't removed.
They absolutely were not removed. And this is where we see the danger of what's sometimes called checklist complacency, or rhyming the checklist.
Rhyming the checklist.
Yeah. It's when you respond automatically to a checklist item without actually verifying the condition. And what's fascinating here is the background. Apparently, Malaysia Airlines Airbus A320 cockpits were supposed to have the actual covers brought inside after removal.
Ah, so a physical check. 3 covers in the cockpit means they're off the plane.
Precisely. A visual confirmation. But over time, it had become common practice to just remove those confirmation covers from most cockpits because, well, they were rarely needed or used on typical flights, so pilots got used to not seeing them.
They got accustomed to the check being clear without the physical proof.
Exactly. So they just rhyme the response here. Gear pins and covers respond removed. It becomes automatic, almost subconscious.
Oh, that's a subtle but dangerous habit.
It really is. It highlights this human tendency towards, cognitive economy, saving mental effort. When a task becomes routine and checking it rarely finds an issue, our brains start to optimize by sort of skipping the actual verification step. The real insight here is how critical it is to design checklists that force you to verify, not just rely on habit or assumption. If something doesn't conform, if the cover isn't in the cockpit, that needs investigation, not just rhyming the response.
That's a profound point, and it applies way beyond aviation, I imagine. Okay, so checklist rhymed. Now, as the aircraft gets ready to leave the gate, there's usually one last check, right, during pushback.
Yes, one final opportunity, the final layer of defense, theoretically.
What happened then?
This was the 5th, and as it turned out, the final breakdown in the safety chain. It happened during the pushback procedure, around 11:11 p.m.
Okay.
At this stage, there's a role called the leading hand, or lead dispatcher. They're responsible for the very last walk-around check just before the plane moves, checking all doors, hatches are closed, ground equipment is clear, and crucially checking that probe covers are removed.
The final sign-off.
Exactly.
Big.
But here's another complication. Malaysia Airlines had recently changed their ground handling providers in Brisbane.
Ah, new procedures, maybe new people.
Exactly. The original leading hand assigned to this flight, he was actually unsure if his training covered him for this specific final check under the new provider. So he called another leading hand, a colleague, for help or maybe clarification.
Okay. It seems reasonable to ask for help.
It does. But here's where a fatal assumption crept in. The original leading hand assumed the new person he called over would do that final walk around.
Right.
And the new person who arrived assumed the original guy must have already done it before calling him.
Oh, no. They both assumed the other did it.
Precisely. So the result, nobody had performed this final, absolutely critical check.
Unbelievable.
The first officer in the cockpit then confirmed with the ground crew all external checks are complete, gets an affirmative based on this faulty assumption.
Wow.
And the aircraft begins its pushback from the gate.
So let's just recap this. 4 different people across 4 different walkarounds or checks. The assistant engineer who put them on, the line assist engineer who saw them but forgot, the captain doing his pre-flight, and then neither of the leading hands during pushback all missed the pitot probe covers.
4 people, 4 separate opportunities. It's just a stark demonstration of how assumptions and breakdowns in communication and procedure can compound, each one relying on someone else or their own flawed memory or just not seeing what was unexpected.
It truly is like Dr. Reason's Swiss cheese model playing out right in front of us, multiple holes in those different layers of defense just lined up perfectly.
Exactly, a cascade of failures.
Okay, so the plane pushes back, taxis, and lines up on runway 01 for takeoff. What was the situation like then?
The weather was fine, wind was very light, only about 3 knots, which is important because it means the indicated airspeed the pilots should see and the aircraft's actual ground speed should be very, very similar during the initial takeoff roll.
Right, not much wind effect.
Correct. So the first officer, pilot flying, advances the thrust levers to the FLEX detent for a reduced power takeoff. The aircraft starts rolling. At about 30 knots ground speed, that's typically where the airspeed indicators on the display come alive, nothing happened. No airspeed indication registered.
Ominous.
Very. Then, at 50 knots ground speed, red speed flags appeared on both the captain's and first officer's primary flight displays. big red flags where the airspeed tape should be.
What do those flags mean?
They indicate a significant discrepancy. Either the airspeed data is invalid, or there's a mismatch between different sources, or in this case, likely a mismatch between the sensed airspeed, which was near zero, and the actual ground speed.
So, a clear warning sign. How did the crew react?
The captain reacted quickly. He started calling out speed, speed, with increasing intensity, alerting the first officer.
Okay, good CRM there. Alerting.
Yes. But then, this is where things get really critical under pressure. There was an unrelated radio call from air traffic control just then, which momentarily distracted them, only for a few seconds, but at a crucial time.
Bad timing.
Terrible timing. Seconds later, the captain called out 100 knots. Now, he was referring to the ground speed shown on the display, not indicated airspeed, because that was still showing flags.
And why is 100 knots so significant?
For Airbus aircraft, this 100-knot mark during takeoff is a really critical decision point. Below 100 knots, the training is generally ejecting. You reject the takeoff for almost any significant warning or abnormality.
Okay, stop if there's doubt.
Pretty much. But above 100 knots, pilots are trained to be go-minded. You generally continue the takeoff unless it's a really severe, unmistakable problem, like an engine fire, engine failure, or something that makes the aircraft uncontrollable.
So they hit this critical decision speed based on ground speed while having zero reliable airspeed indication. What did the first officer do?
Well, his confusion was audible on the cockpit voice recorder. He said something like, abort, both, no. Clearly unsure, processing this conflicting information, the lack of airspeed, the flags, but also the increasing ground speed and passing that 100-knot threshold.
A moment of intense pressure and ambiguity.
Absolutely. And despite the clear issue with the airspeed, the aircraft continued accelerating. It went past 118 knots ground speed. Then the first officer called out, go to ADR3.
What's ADR3?
It's switching the air data reference source that feeds his display to the third standby system. Now, on one hand, this shows good technical knowledge. He's thinking about alternate data source.
Right, trying to troubleshoot.
But it was absolutely the wrong action at that moment. That's a non-normal checklist procedure, something you do once you're safely airborne and stable or before takeoff. Not during the critical takeoff roll when rejecting the takeoff was still a viable and arguably the correct option, especially below V1 speed.
So trying to fix it instead of stopping it.
Exactly. And just 3 seconds after he called for ADR3, the aircraft passed V1, the decision speed after which you're committed to go, and then immediately hit rotation speed, VR, all based on ground speed indications.
And he rotated.
He initiated the rotation, pulling back on the side stick, based purely on the ground speed readout.
Wow. The captain must have reacted to that.
He did. The CVR recorded him questioning, almost incredulously, you rotated on ground speed.
So let's pause there. Why? Why did they continue the takeoff with such clear escalating warnings about the airspeed? It seems so counterintuitive to the training.
It does on the surface.
Yeah.
But pilot psychology under extreme, unexpected stress plays a huge role here. Airspeed problems are notoriously insidious.
Insidious? How so?
They can manifest in many different ways. Sometimes it's flags, sometimes it's readings that are clearly wrong but not flags, sometimes it's disagreements between the different indicators, and crucially, unlike an engine fire, which usually has loud bells and bright lights, unreliable airspeed often doesn't come with a specific, loud, attention-grabbing oral warning during the takeoff roll itself.
Ah, so pilots are maybe more primed to react to bells and loud warnings for a reject.
Very much so. The training for high-speed rejects often focuses on those really salient, unmistakable warnings. An airspeed flag, while serious, might not trigger that same immediate stop-now reaction, especially when combined with the rapidly increasing ground speed and the time pressure.
And the pressure is immense at that point.
Immense. Your aircraft is accelerating rapidly towards the end of the runway. There's this cognitive trap where, instead of following the simple rule, something's wrong below 100 knots, reject, your brain gets caught up trying to diagnose the problem. What's wrong? Can I fix it? ADR3. You're trying to solve the puzzle instead of executing the pre-learned safety maneuver.
That makes a scary kind of sense. The cognitive load of the unexpected anomaly overrides the trained response.
Exactly. It's a powerful demonstration of how stress impacts decision-making.
Okay, so they're airborne, rotated on ground speed, no reliable airspeed. What happens immediately after liftoff?
Right away, as the wheels left the ground, a master caution warning sounded through the cockpit. The message was auto flight, auto thrust off.
Okay, so the autopilot and auto thrust systems kicked out. Why?
Because they rely on valid airspeed data to function correctly. Without it, they automatically disengage for safety. So now the aircraft is being flown entirely manually, climbing out, with still no valid airspeed indication on any display.
And what was showing on the airspeed indicators now still flags.
Interestingly, the initial red flags disappeared shortly after liftoff, but the airspeed indication never went above about 50 knots. It just stayed pegged low.
Why would it show anything at all if the tubes were blocked?
The thinking is that the pitot probes have heaters in them to prevent icing. Those heaters likely started to burn or melt through the wasp nest material or the fabric covers themselves, allowing a tiny, tiny amount of air pressure in, but not enough to give anything like a correct reading. Just enough to clear the initial flags, maybe.
Wow. Okay, so manual flight, no airspeed, autopilot out. What else is happening?
Another critical thing happens automatically. The aircraft's flight control system reverted from normal law to alternate law.
Explain that. Normal law versus alternate law.
Okay, normal law is the standard mode for Airbus fly-by-wire aircraft. It provides full flight envelope protections, things like preventing stalls, overspeeds, excessive bank angles. It keeps the plane within safe limits.
Got it. Protections are wrong.
Right. But alternate law is a degraded mode. It kicks in when there are failures in redundant systems, like the air data sensors here. In alternate law, some or most of those protections are lost. The pilots have much more direct control, but also much less protection from getting into dangerous flight regimes.
So the safety net gets smaller.
Much smaller. And initially, the first officer who was flying pitched the aircraft up to about 13 degrees nose up, and he kept the thrust at the reduced flex setting they'd used for takeoff.
Was that correct?
No. The immediate actions for unreliable airspeed, the memory items pilots are supposed to know by heart, include disconnecting autopilot and auto thrust, which happened automatically here, but then pitching to 15 degrees nose up and applying full TOGA takeoff go-around thrust.
Ah, so pitch higher and use full power to ensure a safe climb gradient.
Exactly. He missed those initial memory items, likely due to the high stress and confusion. The confusion continued. He again asked the captain about switching to ADR3.
Still trying to fix the source.
To still try to diagnose. As they climbed, they started working through the ECAM, the electronic checklist system for the auto-flight, auto-thrust-off message. And then a bit later, they got the alternate law warning, which is actually inhibited below 1,500 feet to avoid nuisance warnings near the ground.
So a cascade of warnings and procedures to deal with, all while flying manually without airspeed. What about talking to ATC?
Communication was also initially problematic. They tried to make a PAN-PAN call while still on the tower frequency.
PAN-PAN meaning urgency, need assistance, but not immediate life-threatening danger like Mayday.
Correct. But the tower controller apparently missed that initial call, possibly due to frequency congestion, or maybe not expecting it.
Another communication snag.
Yeah. It wasn't until they were handed over to the departure frequency controller that the PAN-PAN call was finally heard and acknowledged. From that point on, though, ATC provided excellent support, clearing airspace for them and providing information like ground speed readings.
Okay, so they got the support they needed eventually. And you mentioned good CRM earlier. Despite the initial takeoff decision, was there more evidence of that?
Absolutely. There was a really remarkable moment captured on the CVR. The captain, quite correctly, was working through the QRH, the Quick Reference Handbook, trying to find and read the non-normal checklist for unreliable airspeed.
Following procedure.
Following procedure. But the first officer, who was hand-flying the aircraft in alternate law, without airspeed, dealing with the climb, basically told him, stop the checklist.
Stop the checklist, isn't that usually bad?
Normally, yes. But he followed it up with, I need to concentrate now on just flying the aircraft.
Ah, prioritizing. Aviate, navigate, communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He recognized that in that specific moment, maintaining control of the aircraft, aviate, was the absolute top priority, even overrunning the checklist immediately. It showed excellent situational awareness and assertiveness. It's a fantastic example of effective crew resource management, the pilot flying, stating his needs clearly to the pilot monitoring under incredible pressure.
That is impressive. So where did they end up?
They managed to level off safely at 11,000 feet. They requested continuous radar vectors from ATC, basically asking ATC to guide them around while they tried to troubleshoot. And it was up there, working through the checklist, that they confirmed their worst fear. All three air data reference units seemed to be inoperative or providing garbage data.
All three ADRs down? That's highly unusual, right? They're independent systems.
Extremely unusual, which strongly pointed towards a common cause affecting all the probes simultaneously, like, say, covers left on all three pitot tubes.
This sounds like a moment where clear thinking is crucial. They're stable but still in a very dangerous situation. How do you even begin to fly a modern jet like this, let alone land it, with no reliable air data? Did Airbus have, like, a trick up its sleeve for this scenario?
They absolutely did, and it's quite a clever system. The checklist for unreliable airspeed eventually leads you to a pretty drastic step.
Yeah.
Switching all 3 ADRs off, completely off.
Turning off your main air data sources, that sounds terrifying. And irreversible in flight.
Irreversible in flight, yes, a big decision. But the checklist directs you there if all else fails.
Yeah.
So at 11:43 p.m., about half an hour after takeoff, they did it. They switched all 3 ADRs off.
Okay. What did that achieve?
That action unlocked access to something called the backup speed scale, or BUSS. Yeah, it's this nifty little system designed for exactly this kind of catastrophic air data loss. It basically replaces the normal airspeed tape on the primary flight display with a simplified, color-coded scale.
What does the scale show?
It doesn't show actual knots. Instead, it visually guides the pilot on the safe pitch attitude and thrust setting needed for their current aircraft weight and flap configuration to maintain a safe flying speed. Green means you're in a safe envelope. Amber means you're approaching a limit. Red means danger.
Ah, so it's not telling you your speed, but it's telling you how to control the plane to stay at a safe speed, using pitch and thrust.
Precisely. It provides that crucial guidance visually, information you'd normally have to dig out of performance charts in the QRH, which is hard to do while hand flying in an emergency.
That sounds like a lifesaver, a digital guide giving them a fighting chance. But turning off all the ADRs, surely that had other consequences. What were the trade-offs?
Oh, absolutely. Engaging the BUSS by switching off the ADRs comes with significant limitations. Big ones.
Like what?
Okay, so
Yeah.
no speed brakes available, manual pressurization control required. For landing, you need to use gravity extension for the landing gear.
Gravity extension.
Yeah, the gear basically just falls down due to gravity and locks. But the downside is the landing gear doors don't retract properly after extension. They just hang down.
Okay, that could be an issue on landing. Anything else?
Yes, and a big one for after landing. No nose wheel steering. Once they landed, they wouldn't be able to steer the aircraft on the ground. They'd need time to move off the runway.
Wow. So a whole host of secondary problems to manage. Did the crew understand all this?
They did. The CVR shows them discussing all these implications. The gear doors, the nose wheel steering, manual pressurization. They then clearly communicated these limitations and their intentions to ATC. It demonstrated really exceptional situational awareness and forward planning, even under all that stress.
Okay, so they have the BUSS, they understand the limitations. What was the plan?
They decided to return to Brisbane. They planned to land back on runway 01, the same one they took off from. They knew they'd be slightly overweight for landing, as they hadn't burned off much fuel.
Can you land overweight?
You can, but it requires careful calculation to ensure the runway is long enough and the landing gear can take the stress. They confirmed with their performance data using the QRH that they had the performance required to land safely, even slightly overweight.
Good. And they informed the cabin.
Yes, at 11:44 p.m., they made an announcement to the cabin crew, informing them they were returning to Brisbane due to a technical issue, but reassuring them it would be a normal landing.
Keeping everyone informed. Now, about the landing itself, who was going to do it?
This is another point where their CRM really shone. According to Malaysia Airlines' standard operating procedures, the captain should normally take control and perform the landing in a non-normal situation like this.
Standard procedure, captain lands.
Right, but they actually discussed it in the cockpit. They acknowledged the procedure, but they also acknowledged the first officer had significantly more experience on the A330 type, and, frankly, he had been flying the aircraft beautifully and managing the situation extremely well since takeoff.
So they considered deviating from the standard procedure.
They did. And they made the common sense, pragmatic decision for the first officer, the pilot, more experienced on type, and who had been handling the aircraft superbly to perform the landing.
That sounds like really adaptive leadership, prioritizing the best outcome and the best pilot for that specific situation, regardless of rank or standard procedure.
Exactly. It showed great flexibility and trust between the crew members.
Okay, so the first officer is landing. How would the approach go?
The descent started just before midnight, at 11:58 p.m. It was a real team effort. The captain continuously monitored the BUSS display and called out the required pitch attitudes and thrust settings. Pitch 5 degrees, thrust idle, pitch 7 degrees, set thrust, and so on, providing constant guidance.
So the captain is navigating the BUSS for the first officer.
Essentially, yes, coaching him down based on the BUSS indications. Meanwhile, ATC was providing crucial updates on their ground speed from the radar displays, giving them another cross-check, since they still had no indicated airspeed.
Using all available resources.
Absolutely. Finally, at 12:33 a.m., just over an hour after they took off, the aircraft safely touched down back on runway 01 in Brisbane. The landing speed was about 152 knots ground speed. They stopped safely with plenty of runway remaining, about 1,600 meters short of the end.
A safe landing. Incredible. Was there any damage to the aircraft?
Minimal, remarkably. The only damage recorded was some light scrape marks on the edges of those main landing gear doors.
Ah, from the gravity extension.
Exactly. Because they were hanging down slightly and the landing was a bit firm due to being slightly overweight, the doors just briefly contacted the runway surface during touchdown and rollout. But structurally, the aircraft was fine.
And most importantly, everyone on board was safe.
Everyone's safe. A testament to the backup systems and the crew's handling of an incredibly difficult situation once they were airborne.
What happened immediately after they stopped? Did they figure out the cause quickly?
Yes. As soon as they came to a stop on the runway, the pilots called the line assist engineer, the one who had forgotten his mental note, up to the cockpit. The moment he got there and heard what had happened, he immediately remembered seeing the pitot covers fitted hours earlier.
Instant realization.
A stark, immediate confirmation of the root cause right there on the flight deck.
So after this incredible flight, this whole ordeal, what were the big takeaways? What did the official investigation conclude? What changed as a result?
Well, the investigation, conducted by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, really highlighted how easily these kinds of mistakes can compound. It wasn't just one person's error, it was the assumptions, the over-reliance on others, the deviations from standard procedures that all lined up.
The Swiss cheese alignment.
Precisely. It also pointed out some faults in Malaysia Airlines' own risk assessment processes for operating into Brisbane. They hadn't fully appreciated or integrated the known local hazard, the Mud Wasps, into their specific procedures for that airport, an organizational gap.
So systemic issues as well as individual actions. What were the key recommendations?
Some were quite direct and procedural. A major one was mandating that pitot cover installation must be recorded in the aircraft's technical logbook.
Right, creating that formal paper trail, closing that initial communication loop.
Exactly. No more relying on verbal chats or mental notes for something so critical. They also recommended improving pilot guidance and training on exactly when to reject a takeoff for unreliable airspeed indications, making that 100-knot decision boundary perhaps clearer or more robustly applied.
Addressing that cognitive trap during takeoff.
Yes. And they also recommended that Airbus consider adding more distinct oral warnings for unreliable airspeed conditions during the takeoff roll itself to make it a more salient, attention-grabbing event, maybe helping to prompt that reject decision earlier.
Makes sense. So procedural changes, training improvements, and even potential design changes.
That's right, covering multiple bases. But the enduring message, I think, from this entire incident is just how critical the human element remains, even in our incredibly technologically advanced and highly regulated world of aviation.
Yeah. Communication, attention, decision-making under pressure.
All of it. Every single hole in that Swiss cheese model we talked about really represents a human factor. An assumption, a lapse in attention, a communication breakdown, a flawed decision. And if just one of those had been addressed, if one person had followed procedure rigorously, the entire incident could likely have been prevented.
It's a really powerful reminder.
It really is. And this deep dive into Malaysian 134 is not just, a fascinating story about planes and wasps. It's a powerful illustration for all of us about how a series of these small, seemingly insignificant omissions, these little assumptions we all make, can potentially align to create a major risk in any field. It reminds us that knowledge, like the airline knowing about the wasps, is only valuable when it's actually understood and applied down the line. And that critical thinking, questioning assumptions, is just essential in this world where we're overloaded with information and our own cognitive biases can easily lead us astray.
So let's bring it back to the listener. What does this all mean for you? This story is pretty dramatic, but the lessons are universal, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Think about your own work, your daily tasks, maybe big projects you're involved in, or even just your personal routines. Where might you be making assumptions about checks someone else is supposed to do?
Good question.
Where might you be rhyming a mental checklist, just going through the motions without really verifying? Or maybe experiencing that inattentional blindness, missing something crucial right in front of you because it's not what you expect to see.
Yeah, we all do it.
So the provocative thought to leave you with is this. What systems, what habits, what checks and balances can you implement in your own life or work to ensure that those tiny but potentially critical pieces of information don't slip through the cracks? How can you prevent your own deep dives into unforeseen challenges caused by these easily missed details?